All right, Laura, moments ago, the 49ers took the field for practice, and their tight end, George Kittle, was not spotted at practice. He is experiencing, I'm told, hamstring tightness, which means that when you're not practicing on a Thursday and you've got tightness in your hamstring, you become a serious question mark for Thursday or Sunday's game against the Rams. Those teams play on Sunday in LA. There'll be no Christian McCaffrey, no Cooper Kupp, no Puka Nacua, no Deebo Samuel, very possibly no George Kittle, Steve Avila, Jonah Jackson, amongst others. It's week 3, and these two teams are battered right now. Also should add, Travarius Ward, the 49ers starting quarterback, also not practicing due to hamstring and knee injuries. So this is a team that is riddled with injuries right now, and it just keeps piling up for the San Francisco 49ers.
Yeah, Adam, as you said in your tweet there, it's week 3. Dan, as you hear all of this, you're kind of like groaning. What are your thoughts?
It's shocking to see 2 Super Bowl contenders, legit Super Bowl contenders, in the middle of September. You start to ask, can they survive? Because it's not the ability, it's not were they good enough. Both these teams were good enough to get to the NFC title game. It's can they survive? The Rams, we've talked about, have been decimated, and now it sounds like the 49ers lose another piece. RC has often said when they're whole, they're the best offense in football. This is a lot of last year. 3 of these people are gone and have been for, the remainder, or at least the start of the season. CMC, now George Kittle, and obviously Deebo Samuel. If there was ever a window of opportunity for Brock Purdy to break a lot of the narratives attached to his name that he is just a coattail rider, it is going to be what seems to be a window right now for Brock Purdy.
Way to talk about every damn thing. I was just about to say that. Nah, Dio, it's a good point, man. Like Brock Purdy and Kyle Shanahan and their unison is what matters the most. We obviously saw Mason have a great week 1 with Christian McCaffrey being out, and also ran it well against Minnesota, even in a loss. But this is huge. And we always talk about the concepts with the San Francisco 49ers. How much do you lose now with your playbook without George Kittle being in? I think one thing that needs to be mentioned, because I know when people look at George Kittle and the tight end position with the NFL that we have today, they think about the pass catching ability. He's one of the most dominant blocking tight ends in the NFL as well, which could hamper your run game, which you need to lean on because you don't have those weapons available to you, especially with Deebo and Christian McCaffrey being out. It'll be interesting to see how much he's missed to me in this zone run scheme, where he's such an integral part at setting the edge or eclipsing the edge and making sure that those backs have two-way goals.
Yeah, I wonder if we see a bunch of 20 personnel out of this football team. 2 backs, no tight ends, and those 2 backs being Mason and Kyle Juszczyk. You still have Juwan Jennings. You still have a Brandon Ayuk. Can you get something out of like a Ronnie Bell or Chris Conley that in that third role? And you can still run a chunk of your pass game offense, not certainly to the level, but Brandon Ayuk, Brock Purdy, it's really time for both those guys to step forward and carry the weight of this offense.
Yeah, Ayuk specifically. Obviously, he didn't have a ton of time in training camp. Cowboys' defense has been lit up in their last 2 games in Dallas, probably why Mike is calling it a prove-it week, as you heard there. Between week 2 against the Saints and the wild card game versus the Packers, they've given up a combined 92 points and allowed 12 touchdowns. In the entire 2023 regular season, they only gave up 13 touchdowns at Jerry World. So Dak has struggled with the deep ball, too, this season, completing just 4 of his 18 passes of at least 15 air yards, not just on the defense here. That's the 3rd worst completion percentage in the league, only ahead of Deshaun Watson and Caleb Williams. Last season, he ranked 5th in completion percentage on those throws, those specific throws, the deep balls. Marcus, what needs to happen for this Cowboys offense to get back on track this week against Baltimore?
Yeah, look, last week, CD was doubled up quite a bit, but we don't need to mistake ourselves. If he one-on-one, throw it to him. And it's just that simple. Yep. And we saw the Baltimore Ravens give up some stuff to Devontae Adams. But from a CD Lamb perspective, the reason why teams have played him so closely is because they don't believe in anything else around him. You don't have to fear the run game. You're not really worried about Cook taking over a game, or Tolbert, or any of those guys. So CD has become the prime target. If he has opportunities to either be one-on-one, especially on deep shots, while you move him around, it should be a imperative decision to get him the football. Like RC was talking about with Jamar Chase, need more targets. It needs to be like it was in New York when they fed their young wide receiver. CeeDee Lamb needs to get at least 18 to 20 attempts in this game every time that situation presents itself.
Yeah, you know what? When you look at this situation, this is kind of the perfect week forward. Think about the Baltimore Ravens' first 2 games this season. Rashee Rice goes for about 120. We watched Devontae Adams absolutely take over in the second half and fourth quarter of that game last week. The Ravens don't have a lockdown corner. It's not Marlon Humphrey anymore. It's not Stevens on the other side. This is an opportunity for CeeDee Lamb, who moves around, plays the number 1, plays the slot, can run every route on the route tree, to have himself a day. But you have to give him those opportunities. The difference between the Dallas Cowboys and many of these other teams is exactly what Marcus says. Who else they going to give it to? The run game is not explosive. There's no one outside of CeeDee Lamb that you're scared of on the outside. So if you are any defensive coordinator, and this week Zach Orr, that's the dude you double. That's the dude you pay attention to. That's the dude you lean the safety to. Now, can someone else step up? And I don't believe there is.
A healthy Jake Ferguson can. I believe that him being back is key in this game. Both him and Luke Schoonmaker. You guys talk about week 1 with the Chiefs offense and then last week with the Raiders. I think the linebackers for Baltimore have just not performed in coverage the way that they did in the past. And I think Ferguson being back, coming off that knee, is a big deal. If you go back to last week, totally agree. Devontae was the guy. But then it was those tight ends in those one-on-one matchups in the middle of the field that they really started to work these linebackers.
Bowers,
Simpson, Roquan, Brock Bowers. If Jake Ferguson is somewhat healthy and Luke Schoonmaker somewhat healthy, I think those 2 tight ends could be guys that have really big games, work in the middle of the field versus Baltimore's linebackers in coverage. They have not been up to par doing that this year.
I think it's interesting you say that, Dio, because obviously, I mean, we came into the season saying Jake Ferguson was going to have to be the guy to rear up the production from CeeDee Lamb. We were all skeptic about the weapons around CeeDee Lamb outside of Jake Ferguson, especially in the backfield. But here's the thing, too, right? You got the Ravens coming off 0-2, and with the way this Cowboy defense is playing, and this question is for you, Dio, are you, if you're Mike McCarthy, do you feel pressure to hit big plays and be so opportunistic with every possession you get? Because you may have a feeling that we are not going to be able to get these guys off the field enough for us to get in rhythm.
Marcus, to answer that, 1, I try to come out aggressive in the game to try to give my defense a little bit of an edge, a lead to play with. And then 2, I actually try to ball control and dominate time of possession to keep that defense off of the field against teams like this.
Exactly. Like, I think that's the thing. We are focused on the big play. But when you think about Dak and the way that he operates best is when he's using all 3 dimensions of the football field. And that is why if Jake Ferguson is healthy, if Jake Ferguson can create some separation in between the numbers, this allows Dak Prescott to do what he does, which is get the ball out and dictate to the defense where he's going to go by understanding where he wants to do that pre-play. He didn't do that last week, and we know when Dak Prescott presses, so if Mike McCarthy presses, they're going to be in a bad situation because we saw that against Green Bay, and we saw that last week when they were blown out by the New Orleans Saints.
I'll give you a stat. You tell me if the trend continues this week. Let's start with the Bengals. They haven't been getting Jamar Chase the ball enough, and it shows. He has just 11 targets on the season, second most on the team behind tight end Mike Gesicki. This is despite him having a 91% reception rate, the second highest among receivers with 10-plus targets behind Chris Godwin. RC, did the Bengals get Chase more involved this week versus Washington?
I mean, they better. You go back to last year. They won their first game in week 3 against the Rams. He had 12 catches for 141 yards that game. And they're playing the perfect team to get him a ton of targets. Last week, Malik Neighbors, another LSU wide receiver, had 18 targets, 10 catches, 129 yards. And so if you think you don't need to get it to your number 1, Jamar Chase, you are out of your mind, Zach Taylor. That's the way to win this game and beat that man coverage.
The Cardinals' run game has been a force this season, averaging the 5th most yards per rush. They rank top 3 in the NFL in explosive rushes, first downs, and yards before contact. Not to mention, James Conner has 7 rushing touchdowns in his last 7 games. Dan, does the Cardinals' strong rushing attack continue against the Lions?
They're going to do everything they can to have it do so. 13 personnel, 1 back, 3 tight ends has become a staple for this offense, and they want to run the football downhill. There's those 2 tight ends on our left side, and they want to run in between those tackles. Kelvin Beachum, Will Hernandez, Froho, Evan Brown, double teams. Look what they do to displace these defensive tackles for the Rams and change the line of scrimmage. This is not a run game that we've talked about like the Saints or the Falcons, that it's that outside zone. They want to put those multiple tight ends on the field, and they want to make sure that they are getting downhill in between your defensive tackles and changing the line of scrimmage. This is going to be a very physical football game for this Detroit Lions defense. They're going to have to meet pad on pad and make sure that downhill they protect it. And then they're going to get relatively simple pass concepts dressed up. This is a sail, a post, a corner, and a flat route. But there's 3 tight ends on the field. The post is number 1, the sail is number 2, the corner is number 3. They're going to read that front side safety. If you're flat-footed or you drive the sail route, he's going to take a shot to Marvin Harrison deep. Relatively similar as far as personnel grouping, 3 tight ends. It's the same pass concept, just dressed up in a different way. Play action, post, sail, flag, or flat route, excuse me. That safety stays high. This time he throws the corner route, and it's a beautiful throw of the top. They're going to challenge Detroit with their 3 tight end package, run right at you, and then that sail concept they will call 3 or 4 times in this game.
For more run game that's looked good, let's go to the Chargers. Their run game improved much under Jim Harbaugh. They're averaging almost 2 yards per carry more this season compared to last, and are averaging over 100 yards more per game. Mina, can the Chargers continue to expect these explosive plays on the ground versus the Steelers?
You know, they might break off a couple of explosive runs, but what concerns me a little bit is the underlying metrics are actually not that great. In fact, the Chargers actually rank near the bottom of the NFL in success rate, which means while they have some big runs, they aren't consistently getting 4 or 5 yard runs. And that's worrisome against a Steelers defense that is not only excellent against the run and has been so this year, but if you're in 3rd and long, well, get after that quarterback. I think Justin Herbert needs to throw a bit more in this game and push the ball downfield.